We ready?
Ready.
Everybody ready? With that, we'll start our Selma City Council special meeting. It's October 12th, 3 p.m. in the Selma City Council chambers at 1710 Tucker Street, Selma, California, 93662. Teleconference phone number is 301-715-8592. The webinar ID is 891-6864-5005. When on the phone, if you wish to address council during the public comment portion of the agenda, press star 9 to raise your hand and we will select you from the meeting queue. Press star 6 to unmute and mute yourself. Can you call the roll, please, City Clerk?
Councilmember Guerra.
Here.
Councilmember Mendoza Navarro.
Here.
Councilmember Trujillo.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cho.
Here.
Mayor Robertson.
Here, potential conflicts of interest. Any council member has a potential conflict of interest may now identify the item and recuse themselves from discussing and voting on the matter. Agenda changes or deletions to better accommodate members of the public or inconvenience in the order of presentation. Items on the agenda may not be presented or acted upon in the order listed. Additions to the agenda may be added only pursuant to California Government Code Section 54954.2b. Oral communications. At this time, any member of the public may address the City Council regarding any item on the special meeting agenda over which the council has jurisdiction. No action or discussion will be taken on any item not on the agenda. Issues raised will be referred to the city manager for review. Members of the public are asked to limit their remarks to 3 minutes and direct their comments towards the city council, not staff. Does anybody have a comment at this time? Are you good to stand up, sir? Could we get a microphone to him if he's not?
Volume up. I can barely hear you.
Okay,
Okay.
90% of what you said, I have no idea what it was.
gotcha. Okay. I'll try to enunciate as clearly as possible. Got it. All right. With that, we will did we have anybody online or on the phone who wanted to say anything at this time? Okay, with that, we'll move on to our topic for today, which is a study session. It's an update regarding the Second Chance Animal Shelter progress towards operational improvements and sustainability.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As you are aware, this study session was planned in order to give the city council and the public an update with regard to Second Chance Animal Shelter, animal control operations, who, as you know, Second Chance is the contracted entity who handles the city's animal control and shelter operations over on West Front Street. Our agreement with Second Chance expired and was renewed at the beginning of July, and the council at that time approved an increase in the budget in the amount that the city would pay Second Chance Animal Shelter every month, from an amount of about $9,000 a month to about $30,000 a month. And that was primarily as a result of the increased expenses that the shelter was experiencing because of increased intakes. Shelters around the state, around the country have been impacted primarily after COVID with an increase in abandoned animals. And, when people brought in pets during COVID and then were no longer able to care for them after COVID was over, a lot of those pets ended up in our shelters, and Second Chance was no different. And so that's led to an increase in the number of animals that are currently being sheltered at Second Chance, which also coincides with is a cause of a rise in expenses. And so they also were dealing with a rise. Most of the expense attributable to Second Chance's operational costs has to do with labor. Their contract requires paid shelter staff, kennel techs, and animal control officers, but they also have expenses related to food for the animals, insurance, and a few other things of that nature, vehicle expenses and whatnot. And so the council had requested, as one of the conditions of the additional funding, that the shelter do everything within its power to reduce the number of animals at the shelter to a target of about 60 to 75. And at the time, there was about 90 animals at the shelter. And we'll receive an update from the board or a representative of the board of the shelter with where they are with meeting that number. But additionally, there were some other conditions with regard to providing financial reporting. They have been providing financial information in terms of their expenses and, profit and loss and things of that nature before we issue payment every month. But I did want to give the second chance representatives an opportunity to share their report and answer any questions that the council may have with regard to current status. And then after second chance is able to present, then staff also has some additional information that we've analyzed that we want to present to the council because ultimately we're here because we want the council and staff want to determine moving forward, what are the best options for the city in terms of providing adequate public safety services with regard to animal control in the city of Selma. And so that's a decision that obviously is not going to be made tonight, but I think if we are able to start the conversation on whether Second Chance has made sufficient progress, according to the city council's expectations towards sustainability and operational improvements to be able to efficiently use the funds that the city is allocating towards them, then we can continue that relationship or we can explore other avenues. But at this time, I'd like to turn over to Parveen Sandhu, who's here representing the Second Chance Animal Shelter Board, and she has a presentation that she'd like to give to the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us here and hearing us out. Can you hear me, Rob? Are you able to hear me?
Sorry, I can't hear.
Okay.
That mic cannot be.
It's on.
Okay, so thank you very much for having us out here today. It was a very short window to prepare this presentation, about 48 hours, so that's okay. We'll go, we did our best. It's data that we do have. And I am here, I am the president, as you all know. So next slide, please. I've compiled the data for this year, so for 2023. What you're looking at are the intakes from January all the way through September. And you can see there are quite a bit of fluctuations. It just depends on the type of animal situations that are going on. When you see larger amounts there are a lot of them are puppies, litters that are picked up, dropped off, dumped. And then, just the influx of dogs that are stray in the city. Every single dog that comes through the doors are documented. It could be there for an hour or it could be there for months. But they are documented. So you can clearly go ahead and see that. So last month we picked up 57 dogs. And 55 of them were from the city of Selma, 2 were from Kingsburg. So next slide, please. There's also a graph just to kind of indicate where we are at. 2022 numbers were also similar. And then next slide, please. And these are the outcomes for 2023. So these are going to be a cumulative number of adoptions, stray reclaims, any euthanasias that needed to be done, or any animals that had died. So this is so last month, just for example, 54 is the number. So that does include adoptions, stray reclaims, any transfer out to rescues that we did, or any animal that was deceased. Next slide, please. And this is a graph that also represents that data, so that it's easier to see and understand. Go ahead and next slide, please. So these are our 2023, any income that came in. So that is going to be the city's contracted fees, any donations that have come in, or any types of money that come in. So any adoptions that happen, any microchips that are implanted, stray reclaim fees, that is all going to be indicated here in your income column, which is the first one. You see that in the month of June, we see $62,000. That includes the emergency funding that came from the city in $55,000, which we needed to go back and pay our vendors that we had accumulated debt with. So food, our food vendor for Phillips pet feed, our vets, all of that, we needed to go back and pay them. So that's what it was for. And then July through September, the city of Selma gives us $30,000 to pay for the expenses. But as you can see, it is not enough. You know, the bulk of it is payroll. You know, when we started in June with the emergency funding, we had 150 dogs. It was not 90, it was 150 dogs. And as of this morning, our number is 110. So you have to keep in mind that, sure, we went from 150 to 110, but we also brought in 57 dogs last month. So that it's a revolving door. That target and that number is always moving. And then you can also see in the second column, which are expenses. That includes payroll, food, and vet costs are our three highest expenses at the shelter. So, and as you can see, we were negative at the end of the month. And we stayed negative until Monday of last week. So payroll for shelter staff was issued, but the checks did bounce. So we are going back to do having to cut new checks for them and also reimburse the NSF fees that they incurred over that. Next slide, please. So our outcome breakdown. This is from June 1st all the way through October 10th. So we had 72 adoptions, 69 were sent out to rescues, 57 dogs were returned to their owners, 16 dogs were euthanized, dogs and cats, so these are also going to include any cats, and 26 dogs were deceased. So the difference between euthanasia and deceased would be with the died on site. So these are your puppies that come in with parvo, any severely ill animal that comes in and just does not make it. Euthanasia is also going to be when we take pets or the dogs or cats to the vet, and that's when they recommend for the bulk of it for euthanasia. In that number of 16, there are only 6 dogs that we had to put down for space since June of this year. So the rest were recommendations by the vet due to severe illness or severe disease that is going to be that can take over the shelter, especially with cats. When they get pan-luke, that spreads like wildfire, and that we cannot have that into the shelter, or even like ringworm and stuff like that. That's not treatable or quarantinable. We can't do that. So the vet does recommend euthanasia because cost for those does skyrocket very quickly. Next slide, please. So operational efficiencies, ACOs went through citations training, so we are and have started issuing citations. And we also, during this time, we are now open 7 days a week for adoptions. We prefer appointments, but walk-ins are available as well because we need to bring the numbers down. We are typically closed on Sundays and Mondays so that we can catch up on deep cleaning and just catch up on everything else. And we limit the number of public, but we are now open 7 days a week so that we can get these numbers down and reach, normal capacity levels. We've also dedicated a kennel tech to phones and office work, along with, other cleaning duties and other duties as well. So we will find that, but, days that staff is out sick or jury duty or, life happening, that falls on the ACO. So if he or she is out on a call may not be answered, but it does get returned within 24 hours. To help with reaching out to the public, we've also invested in a texting line, which helps as well because in September, our phone lines went down. It was static. It was an AT&T line issue where, we could do nothing. We reached out to them and it was fixed within a couple of days. But in that time frame, we couldn't hear anybody on the phone and they couldn't hear us. So that was very difficult. So we had to rely on email and social media. Social media is not monitored 24 hours a day, nor should it be, because we don't have staff dedicated to that. So we got a texting line that is operational during business hours. So that way we can get pertinent information to whoever it needs to get to, and weed through that. If it's just a question about a dog, or if it's a dog or cat that needs to be picked up, et cetera. And that's also a good way for us to keep track and document. And then media coverage. Since June, we have had 2 news stories published, one with CBS and one with Fox News, regarding the status of our shelter and why we are where we are and how we can help. And that the last story was published a couple of weeks ago we're on our 4th euthanasia list. So during our 3rd euthanasia list, CBS took it nationwide. We had people calling us from New York, from New Hampshire, wanting these dogs. So we are working with them. Weather permitting, it's very, it's going to start to snow and the weather's going to start to get crazy. So we definitely want to get these dogs out. They have expressed interest. We're working with those local authorities over there to help us do home visits and all of that, and make sure that these are good homes that we're sending our dogs to, because we're just not going to send them to anybody, because they are our responsibility. Second Chance does take back dogs or cats that were adopted through us. We do not want them out on the streets. That defeats the purpose. So we're trying every avenue and everything that we can to get the numbers down so that we can be operating efficiently. Next slide, please. What we need help with is a municipal code update. We can sit here and network the dogs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. But if we do not have the backing of a better municipal code, it's futile. Our efforts are futile. We're going to continue to get high number of dogs, and we're never going to be able to keep up. And it's just going to be a catch-22. We're always going to have to put down dogs. We need mandatory spay and neuter as a part of our dog licensing process, and it should start now. That way, we're reducing that population, we're reducing those numbers, and so there will be less stray dogs or cats. And that will also help. Let's spay and neuter clinics, right? If we are able to put that on with any sort of funding, grants and whatnot, we can help the public that already have pets spay and neuter at a very low cost or no cost at all. Mandatory microchips. All animals must be microchipped. It just takes one scan. We're immediately able to find out if it has a microchip, and we can even take the dog home, call out in the field, call the owner and say, hey, just picked up your dog. It's working. But when dogs and cats are not microchipped, we do not know who they are, and thus that they stay at the shelter for as long as they do, because our name is Second Chance and we want to give them that second chance to go home. Our first euthanasia list, there was a dog that had been here for a year, and his owners had moved, and they thought that he ran away because they took him to a new place, and they thought he had died, and they never came and looked. But when they saw his photo on social media that he was going to get put down, they immediately rushed down to get him, and he had been there for a year, and he was ecstatic to go home. And that's why, and it's stories like that fuel us and motivate us to keep going. He wasn't meant to go. It wasn't his time. And then working together with code enforcement, collaboration. If we work hand in hand with code enforcement, we can let them know, like, hey, this rundown house or whatever has 6 dogs. City of Selma doesn't allow you to have 6 dogs. Or they can let us know, say, hey, there's X number of dogs here. We need to go ahead and take care of this and make sure that, everybody's following the rules, citations if they need to be issued. And then also having access to that license database. If we're making a call at a certain address and that dog is not licensed, that's revenue there for the city. And then also we can make sure that dog is microchipped and that, it's registered and that the city knows about it. And we also had mentioned taking photos of these dogs and making sure that, we know which ones they are. We see the dogs all the time, especially the repeat offenders that are constantly getting out. We should be working with code enforcement and making sure that their fences are secured, that their buildings are secured and up to code. So that way their animals will be secured. Fosters, volunteers, we need them. No dog should be staying at the shelter. It is not an environment. They are constantly in fight or flight mode. It does not allow them to de-stress and actually become a dog that will be adoptable. When we transport dogs out to other facilities, other adopters or whatnot, they are a completely different animal once they get in that vehicle because the barking has stopped. They are not under any stress anymore and they are able to relax and decompress. And by the time we get to our destination, their true personality starts to come out. And then we follow the 3-3-3 rule, which is 3 days, 3 weeks, and 3 months. And most dogs don't take 3 months to fully, adapt to their environments, but we want to be able to give them that. We're keeping the dogs in a high stress environment, which is not making them adoptable. We took a dog out that we thought wasn't cat friendly. He was very selective. He was very dog selective. But when we got out to his foster, he immediately started to play with her cat. Who would have thought? We never gave him the chance. So we need to give them that opportunity. So we need the fosters so that they can give them a home environment of where they're actually going to be staying. These dogs aren't going to stay in a shelter. They didn't stay in a shelter. They came from a home. And volunteers, we need a steady source of volunteers. We're working with the high schools. We do have actually high school kids that work for us on the weekends, and they actually started their own club. And at Selma High, and it's called For the Dogs, Save the Dogs. And it's specifically for Second Chance Animal Shelter. They're constantly posting and networking, and they also create challenges and for themselves. Hey, who networks the most dogs, in the group gets a prize or whatever through their school, which is motivating. And then they're also bringing in other club members to volunteer on the weekends. So we definitely need that from the community. So that way we have less staff there, right? Less payroll, but also there's an investment from the community in the shelter because the shelter essentially is servicing the community. So the community needs to buy in to the facilities that it has and take care of and have pride. Next slide, please. That is all that I have. We are trying our very, very best. We are honestly burning on both ends. We're trying to get the dogs out, but we can't get them out fast enough. Euthanasia is something that is a reality, and we're trying our very best. We've only put down, since we started the mass list of 10 dogs a week, it comes out to about 10 dogs every 10 days. We've only had to put down 2, and those were all returned from their foster homes due to their dog aggressive nature. And so that in that case, we didn't have a choice where we had to put them down because they couldn't adapt. But since then, we've gotten every single dog out off of our list. Is it exhausting? Yes, but it's fulfilling and it's worth it. Just before I came here, Fresno Humane has shut its doors today. It is not taking any dogs in because it is inundated. We are not alone. So if there's a dog out in Fresno County, they're not taking it today. It's going to roam. And if it's a vicious dog, it will bite. So, all of us are trying. All of us are constantly trying within the community to get the dogs out. We're networking with each other. We're working with Visalia Animal Services. We're working with Fresno Humane, their transporters to collaborate and get the dogs out. So it is going to be, a statewide or even a nationwide effort to make sure that these dogs get out. Also wanted to add that the immediate communities, their ACOs are getting together here in the next few weeks to decide on better ways to do things. what they're experiencing at their shelters, what their resources are, what their fostering and networks are, where their rescue networks are, so that we can share the information and we can all utilize it and benefit from it, which is, I think, is great. We need more of that, and we'll be doing that within the next couple of weeks as well. Any questions?
Thanks for your presentation, and more
you.
importantly, thanks for everything that you and Second Chance have done.
Thank you very much.
Does council have any questions for President Sandu?
I do.
Yes.
Harvey, currently, how many dogs do we have right now?
Right now, we have 110 dogs as of 10 a.m. this morning. That does not include any puppies that are under 3 months of age.
Okay. And in July, when we first had our meeting, we were at 160 something dogs, was
It
it?
was
160.
slightly above 150 dogs.
In terms of the payroll, what happened with the payroll? I'm sorry, you said payroll checks bounced.
Yes, so our last check was on payday was September 29th. And we did not receive our check from the city until this past Monday. And so all of those checks last week bounced because checks were issued. And now I think it's about 7 checks have come back. A couple employees are still holding on to their checks, but we have to go back and reimburse them. There's still a hold on the account on the check because it is a large amount of $30,000. So the full check, $24,000, is on hold until the 16th. Payroll is also due today. So, we'll be holding the checks until the 16th. So that way staff does not incur any NSF funds or fees. And, the shelter doesn't incur those either because we do need, that is because of us. So we will be reimbursing those fees back to the employees, but it is also creating derogatory credit for our employees. Since earlier this year, all the way till now, because payments are being rejected. Everybody does automatic payments now. Payments are being rejected, so it's actually creating some derogatory credit for some of our employees, especially when it comes to like car payments and mortgages and stuff.
Okay, explain to me, wait a minute, payroll's due September the 25th,
It was due on the 29th, so it's a biweekly payroll.
biweekly payroll.
So it's every other Friday.
Okay,
So-
but checks go out, I know because I see it on the register,
Mhm.
and your checks go out monthly. So how did it get behind?
So our check, we typically receive it like the first couple of days of the month, but we did not receive it until this past Monday.
Oh, so that's on the city.
Yes.
But-
I think so.
I have a question. If I may.
Wait, I'm not done.
Go.
Am I correct? You did not get your check from the city?
Correct. The City of Selma is our primary source of funding.
So we're here to work together and to resolve these issues. How are we not getting these checks out on time so that they're not in these positions? That's what I don't understand. Are we doing this with other vendors, with other people that are relying on their checks? Because that's very disturbing to me.
Is that a question directed at anybody specific?
I would like an answer.
Sure. So, yeah, I think if you recall, Councilmember Guerra, when the council extended the agreement with Second Chance Animal Shelter, there were some reporting requirements attached to that, which had never been requested before, right? So there was an adjustment period, and still is ongoing, where the communication has to occur or had to occur between the city and the shelter as to what information is being requested. If it's not being sent, then we go back and say, this isn't the information we're looking for as far as your financial statements, profit and loss, where you are with the balance. Still, I have questions, right? And it's not always as soon as we get their information, on the last day of the month or whenever it is, that we can turn it around that quickly. And I, as the city manager, cannot release a check of $30,000 without first verifying the information that the council has asked me to verify. And yeah, that does happen with every vendor. We make sure that everything has been delivered that was supposed to be delivered, and that all the conditions are being met before we release payment. So it's more of a fiscal check and balance. You know, there's definitely a lag time sometimes between when we get their information. It's not always the most timely, and it's not always timely as to when we can review that information. And so there's still that adjustment period of us understanding the information, because sometimes they'll send me, you know, their bank statement, or sometimes they'll send me their profit and loss statement, and sometimes it doesn't show, you know, what the actual balance in their checking account. So for example, the slideshow that Ms. Sandu just presented, it had a column with net income. Well, it's not clear to us whether that's the net income just for that month, or if that's the running balance in their checking account, right? So there's all questions that we have to verify before we can release a $30,000 check of city funds.
Could I clarify to that? Okay, so typically we send you weekly reports that are your profit and loss detail. And that is going to be for the week prior. So it goes from Sunday to Saturday. And those are typically sent on, you know, Monday night, Tuesday morning, the latest. And those have been including the bank statement as well, which I do send to you in Excel format. And it tells you, you know, for that time. Well, actually, I send you the bank statement at the end of the month, because charges are coming, you know, if there's a charge on Friday, it's not going to hit the bank until Monday morning, right? It's not going to hit. So those are sent to you as well. And then we also send you the monthly recap. I could not send you the monthly recap on the 29th because we still had one more day. And that was sent to you on Tuesday morning, the following Tuesday, which was what, the 2nd or the 3rd. So they are sent Monday or Tuesday of
Second and the third
following.
is already, you know, a couple of days into the month, right? And as I
Correct.
mentioned, that can't be turned around that same day. In a lot of cases, I was out of the state, traveling, et cetera, et cetera. So, but those reports that you're sending haven't always been sent, right? That's information that we started requesting more recently. And so as we're reviewing those, there's a lot of questions that we still have, and I've kicked back questions to you, and there's a lot
Sure.
of back and forth that occurs
The
there.
bank statements are something new that you requested, but they're not actually a part of our contract. But the profit and loss detail
Mhm.
that we've been sending, we weren't sending in July, which was my just lack of communication, I think, or a lack of understanding, because I thought what you
It's
had,
an adjustment period.
it was just an
Mhm.
adjustment period, but we have consistently been sending you weekly reports for the last 8 weeks.
So go ahead. Mhm.
So I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Were you done?
Is that okay? Okay,
That's fine.
Okay, we're okay. So first of all, you stated that you had 48 hours to prepare data. Is that because you had no communication with the city? Because we had a communication order about 3 weeks ago that we were gonna have.
Yes, I actually did receive the notification on the 19th, and then I did email city manager and asking him what information, if any, would be requested from us. And I had continued to send several emails, and then finally I got a response back on Tuesday.
Okay, so let's back it up a little bit. Let's back it up a little bit. So the statement was that you had 48 hours to prepare data, and at the end of the day, and this is this information I'm getting, I'm just gathering it
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, I want to make it very clear. I understand that the public's here because they're very concerned of the animal shelter, and I understand my due diligence of understanding that the importance of what the animal shelter is to our municipal government to make sure that we need to provide this service. But
Absolutely.
aside of that, your accounting practices is what I'm gonna ask for right now, okay?
Okay.
How you practice and what the percentages of payroll is versus that pie chart of payroll of that $30,000 per month. How much of percentages of the payroll?
For the $30,000 out of that, it's almost 80% almost.
Okay. So the next question is, you said that in the amount of animals that you had actually provided in the past was really 150, not 90.
We can go back and look at the record.
That's
Yeah,
what
it was
you-
150
that's what you
in
This is
June. Yeah.
really important because when the municipal government is funding an agency,
Mhm.
numbers matter.
Absolutely.
So right now I'm listening to what she stated and what I'm saying, right? Because I have to take it in and I have to actually analyze and say to myself, is it something practical that we can finance? Okay,
Correct.
so just bear with me. So you said also that you guys wrote checks out and they both, and they actually, they were bounced, correct?
Correct. Payroll gets automatically issued. And so funding has to be
So-
there.
Payroll gets issued automatically?
It's a third-party vendor that we use. So we process payroll like we're supposed to per labor laws. Every 2 weeks, we process the payroll.
That's very
but-
understanding. But the question I have for you is, why would you write a check knowing that the check's gonna bounce?
We were anticipating the check that we've normally been getting on the first week of the month. So we were anticipating that money to be there and it was not there.
So in the accounting
when we-
practice, in the
Mhm.
accounting practice that you do, and just for me to understand,
Correct.
when you print out your bank statements, you send it to the city hall, and we had this discussion. I would like, and I asked this prior. So because that you're working with a municipal government and you receive money in an account and you write checks and then you post them, I think you would put them in a general ledger, correct?
Correct.
And that general ledger is sent along with that bank statement to the city also, correct?
No. We send you our detailed profit loss, what actually hits our
Okay,
bank.
But I mean,
Mhm.
that's one area of concern, because in a practical accounting system, there is a bank account with a general ledger. And I'm just, right now, what I'm
Right.
doing is looking at the fundamental process of the animal shelter, not anything else. So
Mhm.
right now, it has more to do with, not with what you guys were talking about, it has to do with my questions of my concern, because at the end of the day, I need to know what the actual cost is, because I need to know if we're gonna have to finance it more, and these are not accurate numbers, and they're not being accounted accurately, then we need to get someone in that office to accurately account it, so we can know that the operating function is more than what we're actually giving. That's the reason why. So just bear with me. So in a process, you stated that the city is not, in your contract, the city's not required, or you're not required to give this information to the city. Is that correct?
Well, I've been asking for a lot of feedback and I do get some feedback. And every email I ask, do you need me to clarify? Do you need more information?
But do you see
have
where I
any
would come from
questions?
with
So,
regards to the general ledger matching?
okay,
with
so
your
I
bank
have
statement?
never been asked for the actual general ledger. I've just been asked for financial data. So
That is
I would like to know, well, you can provide, different types of reports, how to
but-
run them. I mean, you could go on an accrual
And again,
basis.
and
You
again,
can
and
go on a
again,
cash basis because.
but then again, I'm
Mhm.
just saying this because after this meeting, I'm going to the ballpark of everybody wanting to know, where's this gonna go to, right? And I
Right.
wanna know what's gonna actually, what it really is costing versus where we're at. Because also in that general ledger, you're also gonna tell us bad debt, and those bounce checks are all gonna be in those bounce. And
Absolutely.
in 5 months, if you had that many, it would scream loud, right? And
It
we
would.
would be able to analyze and say, wait a minute. Even though you're feeding them, even though you're providing care for them, even though you're doing X, Y, and Z, you're still over $3,000. But we can't see that if it's not in the right format. I'm talking myself only. Because we can talk all we want, but if it's not if it's not documented in accounting format, then I can't see. And it's really clear that, this animal shelter has been done numerous of things in the past years, and I commend you guys. Right now, we just fell short, and we need to justify to our citizens the actual cost, because if it's more than that, then we have to take it a deep approach. And that's where I'm coming from. I'm not coming from a operational standpoint of, the check bounce and people are, right now, to me, it's a bigger picture. It's about, hey, you know what? And this goes to you. I will have discussion with our council saying, hey, maybe we do need X, Y, and Z from the animal shelter, because it'll justify us needing to know what the real ramifications are funding this project.
Absolutely, and that's just communication. I mean, if you give me a list of what is it that you want to see, because we can run based on different softwares, based on different algorithms. You can run reports however you need them to.
But
but
the fundamental practice of accounting is proper.
Correct, and it is being followed. So,
Parveen, just to clarify, and I had to clarify because you mentioned something that was inaccurate. You said I've never asked for general ledger reports, but on May 22nd, I asked you specifically for monthly general ledger reports.
And what was that going forward, or was that just for the,
So,
just for the emergency funding?
no, that was on a monthly basis,
Okay.
monthly.
And was that
So-
listed in our contract?
No, that was what I was asking you as a result of what the city council has been requested. So the point is, I have asked you for general ledger reports.
Okay, so you want a general ledger report, but in the meantime, that in the at last, what, 12 weeks, you haven't said, hey, where's your general ledger report?
And I'm still right now, that's the only reason why I'm asking for it, because I want to see.
Communication. That way we're not falling, because we're a partnership, right? We need to help each other. So that way we're meeting our goals and we're setting each other up for success. So if you need information from me, just say it.
It's,
that
it's
way-
in the email. And so
Okay,
what's
I'm gonna need
difficult
20
for,
seconds.
so what's difficult for us as staff when we're reviewing information is having to ask you for the same thing over and over again, right? So, you know, in that same email, you know, I told you specifically why I needed that. The payroll journal documents you sent are not helpful because they don't show all of your other expenses, revenues, and balances on a per transaction basis. You know, there's a whole reasoning behind everything that we're asking because it comes out of this discussions with the city
Right.
council.
And that was for the context of the emergency funding.
No, it
Yeah,
was,
And that was.
I said
yes.
on a monthly basis. So, you know, if there's clarifications that you need from us as to what we're requesting, that's also something that would be helpful
Sure.
for us to know because we have asked you for this information. And when you're saying that we're delaying payments to you, it's a little bit disingenuous because there's also checks and balances that we have on our end and we can't just get your information and just turn it around right away because we asked for that information because we need to review it and make sure that that it's all there, right? And sometimes it's not all there, even though we've clearly asked for it.
Right.
I did have another question for clarification purposes on your PowerPoint presentation. If you can pull up the slide, Reina, that shows the net income.
Slide 6. Slide number 6. One, there you go.
So the column that says net income, what it looks like you're calculating there is the difference between the income you're receiving and the expenses for that month.
That is correct.
Okay. So what I'm showing, so as of June, you had net income of $4,944.32.
Left over
That
at
was,
the end of the month.
okay, that was what was left over at the end of the month for that month.
Mhm.
So then the next month you received a total of $39,059.10. So that put you at about $44,000. And you had expenses that month of $41,000, which should have left you with a surplus of $2,795.61. Yet you're showing a
And
deficit
this
of,
is only for on a monthly basis. It's not a running total. Would you like a running total?
well, no, because you just said that the June number was the balance at the end of the month. So if that number was the balance at the end of the month, then the rest of the number should be the balance at the end of the month. Is that correct?
These are balances. I broke it down by month of what the expenses and what the incomes were for that month. This is not a bank statement.
Right, right,
This
right.
is just showing.
No, I
what-
understand.
yeah,
So I'm
just to
asking
break
for
it up.
clarification.
Yeah.
So, but for June, what you had at the end of the month was $4,944.
Correct.
So that's what
It
you
was not
started,
spent that month.
that's what you started with in July. Is that correct? Okay.
But
So
this is not a running total. This is not a. bank
I
statement.
understand. That's why I'm trying to break it down.
Mhm.
$4,944. You started July with that money. So you added $39,000
No.
to that total.
39,000 is just what was brought in as of July 1st.
As of July 1st or at the end of the month, as of July
I'm sorry,
31st.
July 31st.
That's what I'm saying. So follow me, you know, just bear with me here. So you brought in $39,000. So at the end of the month, you should have had $39,000 plus the 4,900, right?
It's not a running total. It's not, what I'm showing you is not a running total. I'm just breaking down for the month of July. This is what our expense was.
Right.
And this is what our income was. And then. this
I
is how much
understand.
we
That
shortfell
makes sense.
for
That makes
that
sense, but
month specific, but it's
you're not
a
letting me
bank
get to,
statement.
the point that I'm trying to make. It's not a running total, but you did have expenses of $41,000 that month
Correct,
versus income of $39,000, right?
correct.
but you started the month at $4,900, almost $5,000.
Correct.
So you should have ended positive.
But this slide is not.
I
a
know.
running
So
total.
what I'm telling you, what I'm calculating. So what
Okay.
I'm calculating is you ended positive in July of 2,795.61.
Mhm.
You should have ended positive at the end of August at $795.11. And you should have ended up negative $527 at the end of September, right? So is it possible for you to give us going forward, giving us those running totals? Because it's a little bit misleading because you're not carrying over what you're ending with. And so
Bank
we don't,
statements show that.
sure, but it doesn't break it down. You know, if we had this information the way it's presented now, just with another column, I think that would be
Okay.
super helpful because it's a little bit misleading right
Sure.
now.
At the next meeting, we can go ahead and do that.
Just wanted to make sure I was understanding what information I was.
Arvine,
I mean,
think-
had I had more time to prepare this and we could have reviewed it, I could have added that column. But I had been asking for what I needed to prepare, what the council wants to see since September 19th. And I did not receive that information until this last Tuesday. So I could have added, I could have sent this to you.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
just that, so that way we can
Okay.
clarify for
Yeah.
the.
I'm just
council.
clarifying
Yeah.
the information that's up there right now. I'm not asking you for additional information right now, or you should have had this. Trying to clarify what's up there right
I
now.
would love to make sure that all the questions are answered here because we're wasting time, right? I don't want to waste more time and more questions so that we can present all the accurate information.
Sorry, but we're never wasting time. This is
Arvine,
actually,
we're
I
we're
would
here to
rather-
help.
I would
Right.
rather talk about this between all of us because at the end of the day, then information goes out to our community and then people come and they're talking differently. And at the end of the day, right now, you guys are so important to our city. Okay, and even though the conversations and anywhere, grocery stores, phone calls with him goes wrong, that's just part of the discussion of what the outcome's gonna come out.
Absolutely.
So I want you to make sure that understand it is very important. This conversation
No, we're
is
very
really
vital,
important.
but I just don't want to have to come back to another meeting for another explanation when we could have just had the info
I
there.
think that's what we're trying to resolve here, Parveen. We don't want to keep pointing fingers at each other. What we're trying to do is we definitely want to work together. We
Mhm.
love the animal shelter. We need this service here in our community. But what we need to do is we will need to find solutions. We need to find a resolution to run this animal shelter smoothly, and that's what we're asking. That's,
Mhm.
we've stated, I know our city manager did his job and went out to look at other shelters and he clearly stated that it's underfunded. So we know that, okay? We want to work together. We're trying to figure out, okay, what is it going to take to run this shelter smoothly, And that way you're not coming back, you're not having to say, well, heck, I didn't have payroll. We don't want those stories. We want to say everything's running smoothly. And that's what we're looking for. So
I
let's
absolutely
hope,
agree.
that's what we can work with today.
So we have clear communication so that we know what's expected of us and what you guys are looking for. So that way we're presenting everything timely, so everything runs smoothly. And that,
Absolutely.
it's key, it's vital. Any other questions?
Well, I kind of have a question, but more to city manager and maybe to council is we can require that they have a separate account for payroll, right? So that way they know X amount of money goes to payroll and nothing else goes to that. So that we can specify because, like Councilmember Trujillo mentioned is that we are a municipal government. So we need to have that transparency. So you actually need to have, in running a business, and this is just for, in general, especially because you are receiving public funds, is that we really need to know the ins and outs of whether it's the profit and loss statement, whether it's the general ledger, whether it's, whatever we want to know how much money is in the bank at pretty much I'm thinking at all times,
Mhm.
because then we want to know what the true expenses are. If you know off the bat that 80% of the money that you get from the city goes to payroll, then that should go to a different account and just sit there so you don't have these problems that are, you're not making payroll. And then if you know that your expenses are going to be X amount for food, X amount for and I don't know what your budget looks like, but if you have any budget line items or anything like that, I don't know what that looks like. But that's what I'm used to seeing here is that we have X amount that goes to payroll, X amount that goes to benefits, X amount that goes to, postage, X amount that goes to the phones, X amount, everything, there's a line item for everything. And I think that's what we're looking for is we want to know how much are your expenses every single month. I mean, at least that's what I think that we're really looking at is that we want to see where all of this money is coming from. If you're getting this money from, the city, the $30,000, and then the donations, and then the license fees, and all of these things, then that's good. But again, a good practice, a good business practice is, how much payroll is, how much those expenses, those are your hard expenses. They need to be in a separate account so that way you don't have this issue of the negative impact, not only to the shelter, but to the employees. They're being affected with their credit as well.
Absolutely.
And that's not okay. And that's what we're looking at. That's when I heard you say that you bounce checks again, that was very disturbing to me.
It was very
because-
disturbing to us as well.
because
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with whether the city gave you the money or not. This is where you budget and say, I know 80% of my check that I get every month is going to go to payroll so that I can make payroll every single month. And so that's just, you're having to look at those bank accounts every day. I'm in a position now that I have to look at my bank accounts every single day. And I know I need to make sure that there's money in that payroll account so I can pay my employees. I need to make sure that there's money in that bank account so I can pay my landlords, so I can pay my vendors. They have to be there. You have to look at it
And
every day,
It is there.
you
So
know,
when you're
and so
working with-
that's disturbing,
It is very disturbing. So we have about, $30,000. It's guaranteed to come in. But when you have 3 payrolls hitting that month, then what are you supposed to do? We don't have the extra funding coming in. So if we had the extra donations, if we had the extra grants or whatever, sure, we could say, okay, we need to save for the rainy day, but we're at that spot right now where we can't save for the rainy day.
so,
Let me just say something really quick. I want to go back to what Councilwoman Guerra said.
Mhm.
We support you. We're here with you,
Okay.
right? We're a team. We're going to do it. But I think that more accounting and more understanding and line item, everything will tell us that if this is not functioning because the finances are not there, then we need to look at our city manager and say, we probably need to increase this, but we can't increase it if we don't have the proper information to justify that increase.
Okay.
And all we're asking, you're right, it's communication. So what we'll do is we'll direct our city manager and we'll get more communication. But at the end of the day, also, as a city, as a business, we all have the right to expedite. If those checks are coming in late, it's your right to expedite the form so we can make sure that check gets in quicker. But what I'm saying is everybody has a responsibility. We as council, the citizens, you as a volunteer, and we all have interest in this, and we want to get this done. But we need it to get done properly because we have to represent and talk to our constituents and not telling them what we're spending on.
Absolutely.
So when I started with the shelter, the originals who started the shelter in 2013, we had these discussions all the time, and payroll was a big part of it was a big line item, but so were vet costs, so were dog food costs, so were vehicle costs, and so were insurance costs. And, we just to stress that the city is aided by the shelter. That liability insurance that the shelter has takes that liability off the city. The workers' comp that the city has takes that workers' comp exposure off the city. There are lots of dog bite claims. I remember there are lots of them there. And those would have been workers' comp claims, on the city. The liability claims that come about from dogs, mix-ups with dogs and dog bites and bite quarantines, those are taken off the city. Second Chance is a front line. So I don't think that can be underestimated, the liability that the Second Chance animal shelter saves for the city. That being said, I think that's one of the reasons that we're having this discussion today, that the shelter is important to the city and does a very good job for the city and shields the city from a lot of liability. The problem has been, I think the reason it's coming back to the finances is because, and there's almost too much attention being paid to the finances rather than the big picture. in my opinion, for a study session, but the that can be worked out. One information that the city needs from you, and you as a financial person in your day job, because this isn't your day job, right? As a director of Second Chance, you're a compliance person in your job,
Correct.
right? For a municipality or for the county. So you're jibing with what the folks here are, talking to you about, right? So that can be arrived at, that can happen, and that should happen. And that really
Absolutely.
is happening. The question I have is, as having some experience in this world, your expenses, your costs, the reason your net is so underwater every month is because you got all these dogs. You got all these animals there. You've got that you have to feed and care and maintain and provide medical for. And there's probably your driver of your payroll right there.
Right there.
And your food and your vet costs. So I think, at the last meeting, I think we identified the root issue here, which is the number of dogs has to go down. Nobody said, to my knowledge, that you have to euthanize all the dogs just to get there. I think we're meeting today to make sure that you're moving towards that
Yes.
lower number of dogs so that you can get those costs down. And I think the concern that I'm hearing, or maybe the concern that might be expressed, is that you can keep that process going. When you hear that Fresno Humane closed its doors today, then it's going to require you to get even busier in
Yes.
terms of your rescues, rescue express transports, how you get those dogs out so that you can get those costs down. And that's really what I'd like to hear, in terms of the planning to get those, to reduce the number of dogs, not euthanize,
Correct.
but to reduce the number of dogs, to get them to families and to get them to good homes.
We're constantly networking the dogs. We're constantly contacting different rescues, especially when we get newer dogs. The struggle is we have large breeds. Small dogs, no problem.
Yeah.
Rescues swoop them up. I mean, they're gone within days. People want to adopt small dogs. It's the large breed dogs that are not getting out. Even transporting them becomes cumbersome. And then where to take them? Washington and Oregon take them. We take them to Montana. We, are taking some to Texas. But all of that also requires vetting costs and all of that. So it's constant network with all the different, and there are thousands of rescues out there. And will we reach every single one of them? No, the expectation shouldn't be. But we are building relationships as we're going, through this journey and saying, oh, hey, such and such rescue was interested in this, or maybe they can take this. So we are doing email blasts. We are sending the dogs out. So we're constantly networking and making sure that our volunteers are available to transport as well, in which they are. They're making themselves available so that we reduce the cost of actually even having to hire transporters, because to transport dogs, they charge you. So volunteers are doing, so we're just doing like a gas basis, or they're volunteering their vehicle and gas and time.
How much of
To
your
take them
budget is going towards getting the dogs out?
How much of it?
Yes, how much of that 30,000 is going towards marketing the animals? Getting
Marketing
them
the
to
animals.
rescue, and that
It's all
includes
volunteer.
rescues and transports.
It's all volunteer. The fuel that we do have to pay out is a very small percentage, I would say less than 5% that we reimburse for fuel, because most of our volunteers know that the shelter is hurting, so they donate that. They donate their time and they donate that fuel and the wear and tear on their vehicles.
They're heroes.
which is
I
a
get
lot.
it. And if you spent more money on getting the dogs out to save homes, is there a correlation between how much money you spend and how many homes you place those dogs in?
We would be spending so much money just to get them there, just to get the dog out. We would have to do spay and neuter, rabies vaccines, just the transportation alone. We would be spending at least $500 to $600 per dog, per large breed dog, to get them to their forever home.
So what one-time money would it take to get you down to 50 dogs?
It would be a lot. I could run the numbers and crunch the numbers for you, but it would be a lot. And
Is that real? Is that a realistic statement?
yes,
It is.
it
There
is.
is a certain amount of money that would get you down to that 50 dog number. And that would probably solve your problems in terms of your payroll
Correct,
and your vet costs and your food costs.
correct.
But we're getting there. We'll get there.
So I have a couple other questions and it's about the money, yes, but it's about these animals as well. Are these animals in crates? Or are they in kennels or where are they at? Because if you're taking in 150 dogs in June, how are these dogs? You're saying that they're stressed. I'm sure they're even double stressed because
They're
of
in
the
crates,
fact they're out.
depending on their size, they're in crates and kennels,
Mhm.
and depending on the status that they come in. If they're injured or if they've had surgery and they're on limited mobility, they have to stay in a crate or in a small enclosure. So it just depends. And yes, they're everywhere.
Mhm.
They are everywhere.
And so
And
the,
that's the state with every shelter. And it's so unfortunate.
Mhm. And so the other question that I have is also, I'd like to see, because you have a breakdown here of adoptions were set between the months of June and October 10th. There were 72 adoptions, 69 rescues, 59 were returned to owners, 16 euthanized, and then 26 were deceased. I'd like to see in the month of October, this is the amount of dogs I have right, or animals I have right now, 110. Out of those, how many are being like a breakdown of what was adopted, who for that specific month? So
Those reports are sent to the city manager.
okay,
Yeah.
so we'd like to see that. I mean, I'd like to see that, because these numbers, it seems like if you started 150 in June, and then, the number that you're showing here as far as the intake was 74. So how long were those extra dogs in?
Those are running, so the 150 is gonna be the starting total for June, right? And
Mhm.
so then you're adding on the dogs that we took in June as well, so
Exactly.
which boosts up our number.
So-
And then you have, let's say, for example, 63 dogs that got out. We call it got out that month. So it is gonna decrease the total, but we're still gonna have X number of dogs sitting.
Yeah,
And it's
no,
gonna
it-
be a revolving door.
And I get that, but like that dog that was there for a year, I
Mhm.
think you had another dog, the
We have
last
dogs
time
that
that you
are-
said that,
yeah.
that were there. So you don't have a time limit that
We can-
they have to only be there X amount of, I mean, I'd hate to say that something has to happen to that dog, but for a dog to be there for a year, that's a meal that you're having to, like, what's the cutoff or well, no, not, kind of the cutoff, but more of what's the process? What's the urgency of getting that dog back to, I mean, I know that the family didn't know that they,
Correct. So if
You know,
the
that-
dog's
that
not
specifically
microchipped,
do-
right?
Mhm.
The dog's not microchipped, we don't know where it came from.
Mhm,
Dogs can run for miles and miles, I mean, coming from different towns.
mhm.
It's here. It's on our website. It's on, and it's in the system. So the dog always stays there
Mhm.
as, at the shelter, right?
Mhm.
If it's in a foster home, it'll say it's in a foster home. However, the urgency, we do try to network the dogs, but the majority of the dogs that we have are Huskies, Pit Bulls, and German Shepherds. And they are the least desirable
Mhm.
breeds. And the dog that, in question that you're talking about was a Pit Bull. And, a big one too. They look scary. It's breed discrimination, right? But he was the sweetest dog. But, with that said, people walk by them when they come to the adoption floor. They don't want to deal with this older, scary looking Pit Bull, right? So, and it's all about getting them out. Their owners saw the posts on social media, but that dog's been there. How much can we network just that one dog? We're trying. We try to send lists and have rescues pick off, hey, like these are, because rescues send us their criteria. Okay, I want dog friendly, small, like, under 15 pounds. And then some of them want like that don't look like your normal dog, that look different or whatever, or a different breed that you may have. So then we go off of that. Okay, these are the dogs that we have for you. These are the dogs that we, could go to you. They play well together. So we're constantly socializing the dogs as well to make them dog friendly, because people that love dogs have more than one
Mhm,
and they want their, their fur child to play with another one,
mhm.
and they have to get along.
And then just to go back real quick with the finances, again, it would be, budget. If you
Mhm.
know if you're paying them bi-weekly, that's 26 pay periods a year.
Correct.
So then you would take your
26 to
whatever, the
27.
30, I'm sorry,
26 to 27, depending on the year.
No, it's 26. It's always 26 pay
Mm.
periods. And so, I've been working for someone that's bi-weekly for over 20 years, and it's always been 26 pay
Okay.
periods. I've gone through a lot of leap years. So, but the point is that you can budget, if you have $30,000 a month, you can budget that 80% of that, you budget it out to 26 pay periods. And so you can still always make payroll regardless if you have 24, 26 pay periods or 12 pay periods. You can just budget it out. So that was just something that I wanted to clarify. It doesn't matter whether you have 3 pay periods in a month, because it's twice a month or twice a year that you get 3 pay periods. And so that was just, I
Correct.
wanted to
And that
clarify
does
that.
throw us off when we don't have any money.
Mhm.
That's why we requested for emergency
So,
funds.
yeah, so you,
If,
Again, it
if
goes
if
to budget.
council will just permit, we've got a lot of people here. It's after 4 o'clock who would like to speak and address it. Would you mind, President Sandu, if we,
Yes, absolutely.
if you would sit down and let the
Thank
folks
you.
talk, because they're here, they've been sitting patiently. Whoever would like to come up and address the council, you got 3 minutes each. Come on up.
Mine's short. Mine is so short.
Go right ahead.
Okay.
Alex.
My name is Marcia Staley, and I apologize that I wasn't at the last working meeting. I wanted to ask a question. How did the 75 number come up? I mean, only because I did a crazy Google search and it said in a city of 25,000 people, how big should your shelter be? And it said like 2%, which that's more than 75. So I was wondering, was that just because of the size of the shelter? Money or what? So maybe we need a bigger shelter.
Mhm.
That's all I have.
Do you want to address that?
Yes, council, if you recall, that number was determined based on the existing capacity of the physical shelter itself.
My name is Robert Carrington. I'm a retired certified public accountant. And there's stuff in these schedules that don't make any sense to me. You look at 2023 income and expenses. You get to the bottom and there's 2 numbers in there that have a negative. Why? None of the other numbers have negatives. Does this mean a different answer? I mean, is that supposed to be a negative $2,000 or? Usually a negative means a positive, but that don't make any sense.
Gotcha, parentheses.
This schedule would help. Each of these net incomes is a monthly figure. Nothing is cumulative. You also don't know what you started with. So you need a year-to-date figure. 9 plus 17 is 26, plus 14 is 40, so on. But you need to know, what was your bank balance on January 1? Because the next month you just lost 9 grand. That would also show if you had a negative balance at the end of some month. Maybe at some point in time, you're gonna run out of money if you keep losing 80 or 90,000 a year. Another thing is this outcome breakdown. All the schedules up to date are January through September. How come this thing's June through October 10? Maybe between January and May, adoptions were 150. And maybe there were no adoptions in October 1 through 10, which means the adoptions here should read 222. You're not getting any decent information here because it doesn't match with everything else you were given. I've known a lot of companies in the past that have a minimum 2 checking accounts, payroll, non-payroll. I don't know what the shelter has. Does it have 1 checking account and all their expenses come out of that, payroll and non-payroll? Maybe to help keep the money separate is to put it in separate accounts. I once attended, or more than once attended one of their board meetings, and I told them if they ever had questions, accounting questions, give me a call. I'll be glad to give them some answers. I'm still waiting for that phone call. So I'm not, like I said, I'm not sure who put this thing together. But it's like, they're not adding up. Not to my way of thinking.
Thanks, Mr. Currington.
I was,
That's it.
anyway, I think that, pretty much-
Thank you, and hope to see
Thank
you
you
at the
much.
shelter, helping them. Anybody else? Come on up.
My name is Janice Baker and I am their primary transport person and have been probably 10 years. And I use my car and the biggest thing, and I don't know how to solve it. I don't think any of us do. I take dogs, I drive them all everywhere. But like recently I took 4 dogs up to Truckee and I got back and I was all excited. Well, we got 4 out and they said, and 7 came in today. How are we ever going to get the numbers down if we take in dogs every single day or people leave them? You know, that seems to be the problem. If Fresno Humane is shutting their doors because they have no room.
Remember when they left the kittens in the barbed wire?
Yeah.
Remember
I
when they
mean,
threw them over? They got caught in the barbed wire.
It's horrible. And with Central Valley is known because one week I spent the whole week calling all the rescues clear up into Canada, asking if they had room. But the big dogs, and it's 3 breeds, pit bulls, huskies, and shepherds. And most of them, they'll say, if you've got anything else, well, every shelter is full of those. And I took, I think it was 14 dogs to Thompson Falls, Montana in August. She won't take any big dogs. She said, well, you think Montana, they would take the big dogs. They're just not going. They're not getting adopted out. So what do we do when we're getting them out as fast as we can, but they're coming in as fast? I mean, how are we ever going to get to that magic number? And everybody, obviously, if Fresno Humane, they've got a beautiful place, is shutting their door today. Okay, and I just got a thing from Sacramento SPCA. They have no more kennels, so they're waiving all fees, letting dogs go. But people aren't taking them, and there's a lot of reasons. Vet cost, housing, lots of reasons, and just people don't want to deal with it. But when she was talking about transport fees, or somebody was, I just had to get new tires last week and I didn't realize, I thought it had been kind of recent. It's only been 2 years. He said, do you realize you put 80,000 miles on your car in 2 years? Now I go to the coast now and then, but it's all doing the rescue. And I'm not paid. I do it because I believe in giving back to my community. And I have a passion for animals. So I look at how can I serve this community? The animal shelter. So I'll keep doing it as long as I can, but I can't afford another car. It's the wear and tear in the car. The gas, I did use a van. I gotta hurry. There's a nice man. that
Get 3
owns
extra seconds. I interrupted you.
Club One, who owns a van, and he lets some animal groups use the van. And we used that when we found in Montana twice this past year. And the gas was $792. We didn't have to pay for the use of that, but Second Chance paid the $792. I tried to donate most of my gas a few months back, but I can't make it. I'm just on Social Security. So that's the only thing I do is turn in gas tickets to her. But anyway, it's a huge problem. It's a national problem. And I don't know what the answer is. Tell us how to keep getting our numbers down, because you can see we're trying hard if we keep taking dogs in. And I know that if we shut the doors, you're going to have people all over Selma calling, there's a dog running loose, because my mom and dad's neighbors used to call and turn in when our dogs get out. So I don't know what
Thanks,
you can
Jan.
do.
Thank you,
I'm
Ms.
done.
Baker.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you for all you do for the animals. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Santiago Ceguera, 2209 Thompson, Selma. First of all, I'd like to commend Parveen and her people, the transporters, for the wonderful job that they're doing. And I'd like to commend you guys, and I'd like to extend an invitation to you guys to go see the shelter. You're asking questions about kennels. Have you ever been there? Why not? Why not? Oh, you don't got time? Oh, okay. They don't got time. That's okay. I'll accept that. That is not an excuse. Just recently, we fostered 5 babies with the mama. They're all doing really well in Oregon. Right now, we're fostering another one. The mama was killed in Farmersville, and he was just laying there by her. Go to the shelter. I get really emotional. But you need to go. And we also have these two wonderful, or this wonderful electronic billboard. Do we ever use it for the shelter and say, you know what? We need help, adopt, rescue. We got all these things we can do, but we're not doing them. Like, for God's sake, go to the shelter. You gotta see how these animals live to know that they need help. And I know it's expensive, and I get it, but we spent 7 weeks with those poor babies, 5 of them. I have never cleaned so much food since our kids were small. But you know what? When they left, I cried. Thank you.
Next.
Hey, I'm Katrina. I'm with Girls of Dog Rescue. I've been helping the shelter for the last 3 years. Take animals and work them out. You guys are asking, how come dogs aren't getting moved? The answer is, us rescues are overflowing just as bad as the shelters. We also take in dogs off the street. We take in owner surrenders. We take in the neglected dogs as well. But we can't take in anymore if we don't get the help and the shelters don't get the help of our community. Stricter laws need to be done. We need mandatory spay and neuter. We need that mandatory microchipping. When dogs come into the shelter, they automatically need to be microchipped before they get returned. The fees of returning dogs back to the owner need to be raised. This way, the owners get to realize, hey, look, we can't continue to afford this. We need to do something. But if the community is not going to become one, we're not going to get a resolution. It's going to continue the cycle. So Parveen has done everything she can by networking the dogs out. Now it's your guys as a council to realize that you guys need to help bring these laws to a head and get stuff to where the community could work as a whole, not apart. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lizette Hurtado. I'm actually here for my sister. She wasn't able to come. She works very, very closely with Parveen with trying to rescue these babies and place them with all these foster groups and stuff. I have seen all of the work that they do together, all of the work she does. I've seen her multiple times out in the city running around trying to find a little puppy that somebody called her about or that my sister called her about. It's a huge urgency. I understand your questions about the accounting and all of that, but I also think that you have to understand that it's urgent. If you need something, ask right away, keep asking so that you guys can see everything that is being, you know, what she's spending the money on or whatever, or maybe appoint somebody to take care of that part of it. Because aside from that, the biggest issue is all of these poor babies, the conditions that they're in, and what's the alternative? Putting them down, that's not okay. And I don't think that's okay with any of us. And there's nowhere else for them to go. Like, what are we supposed to do? There's a lot of us that try to help and try to take care of them as much as we can, but we also have other dogs. I have 3 myself. So as much as we want to help, we try to help with anything that we can. So I think it's huge. It's very, very urgent. And like this gentleman said, go to the shelter so that you guys can see it for yourself. It's easy to ask all the questions and want certain things for business purposes. But when you see everything happening and all these poor babies on the side of the road, like, that's not okay. They still, like, it's still our responsibility as human beings to take care of these babies. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hey, Chief. I am Crystal Woodward, Pinkie Paw Search and Rescue. 17 years of rescue. My base is my hometown of Fowler. I made them no kill for 7 years, the only no kill municipality. I'm on call 24/7. This is my first year not with the city of Fowler, but in all these years, I'm also helping all surrounding cities and counties, Las Vegas, Bakersfield, everything. But I'm currently training as a pet detective. So that on top of other rescue, me and my husband. I want to thank Praveen. I back her 100%, but I also want to thank you, Mayor. You guys do care about the animals and I can see that. I live, eat and breathe this with the municipalities. Sorry. Very emotional. You guys know I'm the crazy animal person, always, doing stuff. But I think the main problem is the ordinances, because you need to enforce mandatory spaying and neutering. And I know that's going to take a lot of your staff because you have to enforce this with code enforcement. And it's going to be a process, but that's where you're going to get it, is the clinics, spay and neuter clinics, so you can get to the root of the problem. And then eventually it's going to start, you can see the numbers go down. But please be patient with the shelter until that really happens, but you really have to start there. So thank you again.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Rose Robertson. Truly and honestly, I'd just like to say how thank you, Parveen, and to the new board that actually took over. It's extremely a lot of work. We used to always clean every other Saturday. Any of you ever want to go clean? We'd be more than happy. I'd be more than happy to go with you and do a cleaning. It's a lot of work. So God bless them that they took over, gave us time to actually clean our own house on Saturday. So with that said, I'd also like to say that it's been great for the community. It's been great. It's really something strong that the citizens really, truly love, deserve, and their taxpayer money goes towards this. So it makes them happy. It's a lot of work, but a lot of these citizens do come together to do what we need to do for our city. It takes off the liability for the Selma Police Department. It's been stated over and over and over again. There has never been one police officer that would look forward to chasing after animals when they are not trained for that. Unfortunately, I used to always see new officers that have to come when there was a bike quarantine. They were not, their body language was not, you could tell that they don't need to be there for that. They should be the ACOs who are trained, who get the correct training for that. Yes, there was a lot of workers' comp claims with the shelter and why the insurance is very high. That's another thing that it is extremely expensive. Again, hopefully the district attorney's office, they were such a great help when there was a bike quarantine and they had a case going on, and they wanted to get the people that were having these really bad cases and neglecting the animals, or a case where there's a death. So with that said, hopefully everybody will continue to work together for our city. Our city of Selma was very well known of our shelter and still is. Every city comes to our shelter to want to know, how did you guys do it? And the way they did it, it was from the love and the hard work and the community working together, and other neighboring cities as well. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll bring it back to the city. Did the city have a part now? I think city manager mentioned that the second part after the review of the report with second chance, the city was going to propose some alternatives or options or discuss the issues going on?
Yeah,
What's
staff
going on?
certainly has a presentation. I did have one question, Parveen, in your presentation, and this is just for clarification, and I know you and I have talked about it, but for purposes of the council's information, in your presentation, you mentioned municipal code updates. Can you elaborate on that, just so they're aware?
Sure, better ordinances, we did discuss during our own board meeting. Parlier recently updated their ordinances for dogs. So that is something that we should look at and try to mimic or even make better. So that way we can hold our citizens accountable, you know, for when their dogs get out, or when they're
Mr. Carrington? I think that's your phone.
so we definitely need to have an update for our municipal code and ordinances when it pertains to dogs.
Right, but what specifically about dogs, or what, do you know what Parlier's ordinance entailed?
I
or-
do not, I
Okay.
let Chief know that they did update it, so I thought Chief was gonna go ahead and look that up.
Okay, so.
But do you want us to go ahead and do the legwork for you?
Well,
for
no.
that?
Since you mentioned the municipal code update, I just wanted to know if there
Correct,
were
those are the
specific
things that we
things.
needed with help with.
Okay,
Yeah.
but nothing specific that you're requesting right now as far as the update? Like no, I mean, if there's something that you've identified in our code that you think would help you do your job better, have you looked at it from that perspective?
No, but I can definitely get with Chief and see, you know, what our municipal code is, since he's the expert on that. And then we can look at Parlier and surrounding cities and see where we're lagging, or look at other cities that have better codes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
City Manager, I have a question that brought up, what is our current municipal code up? What is it right now?
That's actually exactly what I'm going to start talking about. And that's why I wanted to find out if I was going to talk about anything that Parveen maybe had in mind, that maybe we can bring it up.
Been going an hour and a half. Would anyone like a 5-minute, or do you want to keep rolling?
I know I need to get out of here too.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, mine won't take
Keep
too long.
rolling? Okay,
Mhm.
go ahead.
Sorry, let me share my presentation. Raina, could you enable me for sharing, please? Thank you. So before I begin my presentation, I would just like to say, you know, that I've had several meetings with the board and representatives of the Second Chance Animal Shelter, and you know, I'm a dog lover myself, and I think the work that they do, the selfless, you know, just dedication that they have to these animals in the shelter, I think we're very lucky in Selma that we have an organization like this, because not every community is that lucky. And so we're looking at it from a perspective of, you know, at the city, how do we provide, you know, public safety and meet the requirements of of state law and even our local laws. And that becomes much more difficult to do when we don't have people who support animal welfare and, you know, getting these animals housed that are abandoned and that are sick. So I definitely commend, you know, Nydia, Parveen, Stuart, and the rest of the board. Joan, I've met a lot of the board members and I'm very impressed and just, you know, completely thankful for what we have here in the community as far as that group goes. With regard to the city of Selma and looking at it from a perspective of what our responsibilities are when it comes to animal control, you know, there's lots of different state regulations and statutes that dictate to us as a city, as a municipality, what we have to do to keep the community safe. So, you know, even the Food and Agricultural Code, you know, lays out a framework for dangerous and vicious dogs. The prevention of rabies, we're responsible for that. We're responsible for, you know, enforcement of animal cruelty and investigation and prosecution of those instances. Even the penal code clearly outlines what we have to do in order to identify dangerous dogs and that sort of thing. So from a perspective of local government, our primary responsibility is public safety. I mean, we had an unfortunate incident last year where a resident was attacked by aggressive dogs and lost their life. That's one life too many that is lost. And, that's a failure on our part. And I take that very seriously. And so what we need to do is make sure that that doesn't happen again, right? And so we need to continue to look at it from a perspective primarily of public safety. And secondly, from a perspective of animal welfare, which is very important to us. In terms of further responsibilities at a local level, the Selma Municipal Code actually designates the chief of police as the pound master. And the chief of police can designate a police employee as the animal control officer. It doesn't need to be a police officer. It can be somebody that we hire specifically to do animal control. However, in 2014, the municipal code was revised, which transferred the authority to the Second Chance Animal Shelter for animal control, which is very concerning from a city management perspective, because we're basically saying we have this responsibility to provide public safety, but we're going to give this responsibility to a nonprofit whose primary consideration is animal welfare. So there's a misalignment there of what the priorities are, but we've given up our control of this to a nonprofit organization, a rescue group. And so I wasn't here in 2014. I don't know. Sure.
Yeah, I'm disagreeing with that statement that Second Chance's main priority is not public safety. We got the president right here.
Well,
Is the main objective of Second Chance Animal Shelter not public safety? Right, that was the misunderstanding that I'm hearing
Sure.
from you, city manager.
and I
that
can
Second Chance
elaborate on
doesn't
why
have
I said
public
that.
Safety as
Mhm.
the primary objective, because this is the first time, and I was here for the start of Second Chance, right? I was here when the ordinance got changed, when the city delegated its responsibility. But the pound master still has a responsibility ultimately, and the PD still has a responsibility. Let me just kind of give you a background on what really happened in the animal shelter. Because in terms of public safety, when there's a bite quarantine, and that's public safety. There's animal welfare when you bring the dogs in and you feed them, right? But in terms of public safety, bite quarantines, excuse me, I'm speaking. You asked me for my input, council member, and I'm giving my input.
Excuse me.
If you would
wait,
please
excuse
be
me,
polite
wait,
enough to
wait,
let
wait,
me
wait,
finish,
wait,
to let
Mark,
me finish,
this-
then I will finish.
the
I
city-
will not be interrupted. So
city-
here's what I'm saying.
Order, call to
The
order, call to order.
animal,
Point call to order.
I was asked
Call
to
to
give
order.
my opinion
The
and now
city
I'm being
manager is doing a
interrupted.
Presentation.
He
I'm
needs
being
to stop.
interrupted.
You need to stop. We
So
need to
the
finish
bite
presentation.
quarantine, so let me just
Can you
finish my
please-
thought.
Point of.
Point
The,
point
when
of
there's a
order.
bite
Point of order,
quarantine,
please.
it is
No.
the
Point of
PD
order.
Finish.
that
Please
decides.
Finish his
You're not
presentation.
gonna let me,
No.
Point of order. No.
here we go
ahead.
again, here we go
He
again.
has no
Three,
control over
the-
this board.
here we
So-
go again. The
okay.
three, not even listening to their own code of conduct that says
So can
one
we just-
speaker at a time. I'm responding to the city manager,
municipal
which the
code.
city council member has asked me to do. Let me respond and I will stop.
No, point of order.
So when there
The
is,
city manager is doing presentation.
Yeah.
Point of
so
order.
when there is,
Point of order.
you asked me why I'm taking issue with public safety being the number
Point
one
of order.
objective of the Second Chance Animal Shelter. And I'm telling you that it is the number one priority, that it's never been the second. As far as I've known, I've never heard Second Chance come out and say, oh, public safety is our number two priority. Animal welfare is number one. I've never heard that.
Are we
So
being
this is news
recorded?
to me. Plus, and as proof of that, when there is a bite quarantine, it is the police department that decides, correct? President Sandu of the animal shelter, when there is a bite quarantine, and that's public safety, that's what it means. When there's dogs that are vicious and biting, potentially, it's the PD that decides
But
the disposition of that dog.
But the majority of the
means that
council
the
gave
number
the
one of the
authority to the
objective-
animal shelter. The majority of the council gave the authority to the animal shelter to be the headmaster. That's what the city manager is interpreting. And I would like to hear his case rather than hear you respond to any kind of allegation, because right now The truth of the matter is, we want to resolve the issue. So rather than point fingers, the city manager has done his investigation, doing his presentation. Why interrupt him? And if the municipal code reads that the animal shelter is controlled, maybe she doesn't know that that's the actual code. I'm
Because you
just
asked
stating,
me, because you asked
right,
me,
right now I'm
You
talking,
asked.
right now in talking
because you
as
asked me.
as a majority of the city council.
Backing him up.
I
not
make a
backing
motion that we allow the city manager to speak and finish.
There's a
his-
code of conduct that
I
you're
make a
clearly
motion.
violating,
You're
but you know, you
violating
do it
it.
all the
Can we just
time.
stop
So
already?
go ahead. Go ahead and violate it. I'm done. I told you. I gave my input.
Give me 1
You
minute.
asked me.
Miss, city attorney, where are we at here? Because we're asking for the city manager to do his presentation. We've had point of order by 3 council members, and we're asking for the city manager to
course.
go ahead and follow with his presentation. Is that duly able?
Yes, I would recommend that the city manager continue with his presentation.
Thank you.
Stop asking me for my.
Yeah, exactly. Why didn't you say?
Okay,
he asked?
you're continuing.
Just to clarify, I think the issue was that there was side comments being made while the city manager was doing his presentation. So I think of all council members, if we could stop talking over each other and let the city manager finish his presentation, that would be the best way to move forward with the meeting.
Asking me for my opinion.
So with regard to this part of the municipal code, it's, I wasn't here, so I don't know what procurement process we went through to assign Second Chance Animal Shelter as, the pound master. It does say that chief of police may designate the animal control officer employed by Second Chance Animal Shelter, which I don't know if that's ever occurred, that the police chief has actually been the one to appoint the staff member at Second Chance. So my point being that it's codified that Second Chance is our animal control officer. So we've essentially given our power, a police power, over to a nonprofit organization, which they have the best intentions, but at the end of the day, this is from the webs, and this is what I based my comments on, that their primary consideration isn't public safety. On their website, it says, "We are a volunteer-based nonprofit open admission shelter. We are located in California and provide care to animals within the cities of Selma and Kingsburg, regardless of age, health, or behavior. We are committed to reducing overpopulation by promoting adoption, advocacy for the welfare and protection of animals, encouraging responsible pet ownership, enhancing the lives of our community members by providing volunteer opportunities, educating youth and adults in the proper care and treatment of animals, and providing low-cost spay and neuter programs as grant funds become available." So nowhere within that description of who they are and what they do and why they do it, do I get any sense of public safety being their primary responsibility. And that's just me trying to look at it objectively, right? So Second Chance is a volunteer-driven, and public safety, as I mentioned, is not the primary objective. It is animal welfare. That's why they work so hard to transport animals to Montana and to Oregon and Washington. And they call the shelters because they are primarily concerned with making sure that the animals that are taken in are able to have a home and a good life, which is absolutely the goal, right, of a rescue group, but not of the city. So there's a misalignment there of the purpose and the responsibilities. And I think from our perspective, this presents actually an opportunity, right? Because in other cities where I've worked and that I've come across, there is a partnership that occurs where, the police chief or the public works department, for example, they're the ones out there catching dogs. Excuse me, not the police chief catching dogs, the police department catching dogs. And they bring them in, and then they work with a group like Second Chance, and they say, okay, please help us get these dogs out and find homes for them. But it's not the shelter or the city's responsibility to find the homes. Our responsibility would be to bring them in, get them off the streets, making sure people aren't getting bitten, making sure dogs are tagged, that they're getting their shots, that they're not being overpopulating the city. And then we have a partnership opportunity with the rescue groups. And so I think that's a model that's much more sustainable, because we are asking a lot of a nonprofit group we have volunteers overseeing paid staff. That is a model that doesn't work anywhere, right? Because the board is a volunteer board, but they oversee paid staff, the kennel techs, they oversee the animal control officers who are paid staff. And so it just creates this situation where, you know, they're having to manage bank accounts, payroll funds, they're having to go clean the shelters, they work weekends for free. But the coordination with the city has gone by the wayside, right? Because so we're not, you know, administrating enough citations, we're not preventing cruelty to animals effectively because that coordination is not happening. So all of that presents a really difficult situation where not only are we overpopulated within the shelter, but we're also not effectively addressing public safety concerns. And so what I'm recommending to the city council is that you give direction to the staff to look at possibilities that the city could take on the animal shelter responsibilities, you know, animal control, and look at exploring potential future partnerships with Second Chance to be able to work with them so that they can find the homes as they're doing right now without the responsibility of managing a physical shelter because they're volunteers. And so I think we also need to review and revise the municipal code because from a legal compliance, I don't think it passes muster. I think it's absolutely concerning that we have given over our policing powers to a nonprofit organization. And we're still not complying with even that part of the municipal code, right? So what staff can do is return with the full analysis to see if this is feasible by the beginning of the fiscal year 24-25. We would bring costs, we would have funding sources, and we would provide logistical information as to what that would take to take over the operations. At the end of the day, I think a very good point was made that the shelter is really small for the city, for a city our size, and the city council through the capital improvement program needs to look at budgeting over the next few years for a larger shelter. So we're acquiring a 5-acre parcel. We just acquired a 4.5-acre parcel where we're going to build a fire station. We're not going to use the entire 4.5 acres for that facility. I mean, we have lots of options in terms of expanding our physical infrastructure to support animal control and animal shelter services. We just haven't looked at it. And so I think I'm asking the city council for direction to be able to do that and look at it with community input, with input from all the groups who are involved with animal welfare, with public safety, and maybe it's a regional project. Maybe we work with Kingsburg. I've talked to the Kingsburg city manager. They're having lots of trouble finding alternative options for animal control services because they know that we've placed restrictions on Second Chance and their intake and all of those things. Fowler also has some concerns about, you know, and so I think this is an opportunity, but we need to look at it from, you know, we've operated this way for 8 years or whatever it is. Now let's think bigger because our needs have evolved over since that time. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Any comment from the city council on the city manager's report? And did we hear from the police chief? Did the police chief have any input? Because, you know, you're the pound master.
I have a couple of comments in regards to what you've interpreted and laid out for the city staff. I think you're actually hitting on the nose as what we've been looking at in the future, because at the end of the day, you know, our growth span, we know that we're having development grow, homes are going to start building, and we're going to have more. And we are purchasing property. I think it would be useful for us to do an analysis in regards to not only the funding of the animal shelter, but the actual structure of a, you know, capital improvement plan for the future in regards to the length of the size of the project. And of course, you know, I think that the community, you know, we're here to speak for the community because we've been appointed with the community. But I think the long-term view for our community is going to be to build a new structure and to move away from that small structure. And in regards to what happens with the animal shelter, I think they've been doing a great job. I just think they're funded, but I'm going to go back to saying what I stated at the very beginning. In order for me to look at the facility as feasible, I need to see actual ledgers and things like that to make sure that I'm adhering to my community representatives. But I also know that because just by hearing the community and by seeing what's going on, we do need a larger building. And, you know, I'm sure I'll get fired for this, but, you know, a gentleman said, hey, go to the shelter. Well, I apologize, I haven't gone. But in 2013, me and my wife did a decision to donate almost $17,000 to lay the concrete foundation of that animal shelter. We're not rich, but we did it because we believe and we love our community. Just the same way I love my restaurant, the same way I love all the buildings and businesses that I own. So we might not actively participate. We participate in, yes, I'll get fired for this, but at the end of the day, it just shows cause that all of us up here are giving and donating our time. But at the same time, how are you gonna have me go represent my community when I don't have proper numbering systems and numbers to say that this budget actually reads and defines the proper budget to say we do need to increase this budget. We do need to increase this. So what I would ask you guys, two things on the city manager's proposal. I agree with it. I'm in for the analysis, and I agree that we push this to 23-24's budget so we can let you stay right now function 24, 25. And we budget till June of this next year. But at the same time, bring an analysis to see what we can do for the future, to build for the future. And if there's other municipal governments that are in need, this is probably a good time for us to join hands together in doing it. But there's the easy way to do this and just throw money at it. But at the end of the day, we can all sit together and talk and, make sure that your payroll checks get cleared and are paid. And at the same time, come to a good agreement to come up with a good plan for the future. I would rather do that so I can know that I'm going to lead and help to budget something big so we can have something prosperous. So for that, Mr. Mayor, I'm agreement. I agree with the city staff's proposal, and I would take it to a point where we just move it to the next budgeting year. Thank you.
Okay, so I thought this was going to be a study group about how we were doing in terms of how the shelter was doing, getting the dogs to a manageable number. And it sounds like they've gone from 150 to 110. So I would love to have a strategic planning session on the future of the shelter and talk about issues like where you could actually bring in the dogs for intake and cats like we used to do. And then you would have an adoption center that's in the middle of town like we have it. Once again, these discussions have been had. There's all this talk about getting rid of the past. Well, if you ignore the past, you repeat its mistakes. In the past, we talked about this. We didn't have the funds when it came to animal shelter. You've heard the bureaucratic take on the shelter in terms of, there should be like a number of calendar days and the exit. And at the end of those calendar days, the dogs should be killed. I don't subscribe to that, never have. And that is not a responsible animal shelter in 2023. Maybe in the past, that's what worked. But in 2013, a quick little history lesson. The reason the citizens became empowered to do this was because the PD felt like the best way to get rid of vicious dogs, was to shoot them and tell all the real volunteers to go away and shoot them, and then tell the volunteers to come back and clean it up, but don't say anything about it. So that's when the citizens came together and said, enough is enough. We need to come up with a solution to this. It was never seen as a permanent solution. So I am all for looking at viable solutions where the city is part of the solution. Public safety is the number one responsibility of us up here, and public safety is the number one responsibility of all the departments of the city. I would just ask, after what we've heard today, has public safety been ignored by the animal shelter? Because I really haven't heard that. And I didn't hear any complaints after that individual was mauled by those dogs running rampant. And in fact, I think Second Chance was out there as part of the solution, working with the PD. And I know when I was involved with the shelter, our animal control officers worked hand in hand, paw in paw, with the Selma PD. That's how you did it. And the police chief back then said, I am glad that they're doing what they're doing. Revisions can always be made. Studies can always be made. I'm all for that. But for today, how do we get the number of dogs from 110 down to a manageable number of 50? Because, hey, that's great that we got all this other land in Selma that we could put the shelter on, but that's a ways away. We have an immediate problem here. They can't meet their payroll. They have too many dogs. And they need to find a way at the shelter, because they're the professionals here, to get it down to 50 or 60 dogs. And that's what I would like to know. And that's why I was asking, is there a set number of dollars that would do that, that would find that rescue where we could get those dogs out? And once we do, can we be assured that we will never go over that 50 or 60 again for us, or if we do, would it go back to that number again? And I don't know the answer to that. That's why it's called a study session, not an answer session. But I think we need to answer those questions. And then I think we also need to answer the long-term questions, which we're hearing about, which I think is a good idea, to look at these long-term changes and to look at the laws and to look at spay and neuter ordinances. But I got experience with this. And there are no easy solutions. There are no political bureaucratic solutions that sound great. It's when you're not making payroll, there's a problem. There's a problem. When you got 110 dogs, there's a problem. We gotta solve that. And so I would like another study session where we continue to delve into this problem, because we didn't solve it today. As you see, this council is divided, but we're all together in that we need to solve this problem, and we need to work together to do that, regardless of divisions on the council, regardless that we have an election coming up in 12 and a half months. Regardless of that, we need to come up with solutions right now for the short term and the long term. So I'm in favor of that analysis, but I think we need to stick to it. And I think we need to meet again in 3 months and talk about this. And I'm all for funding Second Chance Animal Shelter, that $30,000 a month, or whatever they think they come up with, whatever they need, which hopefully decreases until we get this problem solved, until we get that number of those dogs down to 50 and 60. That's my input.
So. I'm for all the consensus and reviewing the ordinance. How quickly can we get the ordinance, going?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, that can be done sooner rather than later. As far as the analysis and the budgeting, obviously that would go into 2024, but the revision of the municipal code, I can get with the city attorney to see what needs to be changed, and bring something back maybe in the second meeting of December, or first meeting in December,
First
sorry.
meeting in December, okay. And as far as, no, I'll just leave my comments. Thank you.
Okay, do we have anything from the public before we adjourn? You already said something, Mr. Oseguera. We already had one input. Special meeting, unfortunately. Thank you, Mr. Oseguera. Please do. Okay, anybody else who hasn't had a chance to speak yet? Okay, well, that will bring the matter back to council, or is everybody good with adjourning? Thank you, everybody, for coming out. We're adjourned.